Hello, my name is Frank Mesa. I am the lead designer on the Paridine Fantasy Combat game. I am making this video here. This is actually the first one I'm doing of many. That right now I think it would be best to give you guys a overview of the character sheet. Now I know I posted the character sheet up, and in the player guide there is some instructional documentation on what a lot of this stuff means, but it might be confusing to some people that aren't familiar with RPGs or familiar with the way that normally these character sheets are laid out. I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of what everything here means, so it doesn't look too intimidating and it doesn't scare anyone off. But I think um, once I explain it, I think you'll realize that most of the stuff on this sheet is something you don't necessarily have to pay attention to most of the time, depending on your character. What we're going to start with here is the very top part. You just have to worry about, player name, character name, your profession and title, whether you're good, neutral, or evil. That stuff mostly is up to you, or if you want to randomly roll your alignment, that's fine. You start here with the vitals, and what the vitals are, it's basically the healthiest, basically the health of your character. In this case, we call it life force. Life force is your overall health, how much life you have. It's different than most other role-playing games in the sense that it doesn't actually ever get really high. Your life force will start anywhere around 10, or give or take, depending on your race or your class, and it can go up to 24. 24 is like the most you'll see with that's like a barbarian or someone that's really strong. But the reason your life force never gets so high is because, unlike in most role playing games, your health isn't necessarily a good determining factor of how much damage you can take until you die. It does and doesn't. But here I'll explain the difference shortly. But what it is in Paridine, there are what we call killing blows, and what killing blows are, it is a value or a number that if you take that much damage in one blow, it's considered fatal, regardless if you have 1,000 life force. But for the combat purposes, those killing blows are to keep things lethal, to keep things simple, to let you know exactly what you can and cannot take when it comes to damage. The life force will help you though overall when you're taking blood loss, small amounts of damage. The more health you have, the more you can actually sustain moderately and stay on your feet. So your life force will be a value. For normal humans, it will be around 10. So that will be how much life you have, and if it hits 0, you're dead. Now your strength is half your life force. So if you have 10 life force and you have to make a strength roll, your strength will be a 5. So you'll roll a d6 and you'll omit the 6. If you have 12 life force, your strength is a d6 still, but you'll get to roll the whole d6. Now, in this case, if you are like a barbarian who has 24 life force, you will have a d12 on your strength roll, and then you add your weapon damage to that roll. Now, your strength will have modifiers depending on your professions and titles you can get throughout the game, but I'm giving you the basics as it runs down to it. The toughness is a value that will normally be 0. You won't have any negatives to your toughness or positives to your toughness unless you're frail like a hobbit or someone very tiny, or if you're a big burly barbarian, you will have maybe a +1 or +2 to your toughness. All the toughness does is it allows your killing blow value to be 1 or -1 from its target number. So if it takes 5 points of damage to kill you in the head and you had +1 toughness, it would take 6 points of damage to kill you in the head. And same thing goes if it's a -1 toughness, it's 4 points of damage to kill you in the head. The value there you may never have to touch unless you're playing either a really tiny or really big guy. Your movement, it's how many feet you can move during your turn during combat. Your movement is usually 20 feet standard, but in this case, that's where you'll write the value down depending on your race and class. Your weapon speed, this will be a value that you will carry over from whatever weapon you have Out of all the weapons you can have on your character, the one you're deciding to wield will have a speed on a certain sided die, whether it be a 6-sided die, 8-sided die. Faster weapons are 10 or D12. A slower weapon would be like a D4 or D6. You basically get that value. You basically put, like, if it's a D6 speed weapon, you'll just put a D6 in the speed. It's just a quick place for you to go and just take a look at how fast you are in combat if you have to roll that speed, which is done quite often at the beginning of each battle. Your attack bonuses are just extra attacks you may get throughout the progression of your character. All characters start with 2 actions. There may be times when you drink a certain potion or you're using a special magic weapon that you will get a bonus to your attack, and that will let you have up to 3 attacks per round. Maybe sometimes 4 if you're exceptional or you've gotten exceptionally lucky throughout the progression of your character. That'll let you know your vitals there. There's a mod box where you'll put in any modifiers that are given to you from endowments. So you'll have a base value that your class and your profession and your race will give you, and then you'll have a mod for potions. Anything you might have bought as an endowment later on will add to that. Damage. This category is for writing down and keeping track of any damage you take during battle. Now, the way that damage works in Paridine is you have any point of damage you take to your true damage. It's basically counts as like if I was to walk up and slash you in the arm with 2 points of damage, there would be a wound, and it would be a straight 2 damage that takes off your life force, and it also causes a certain type of penalty. If you take 2 true damage, you'll take 10 pain. And the way the value works is for every point of true damage you take, you will take 5 pain penalty. And what that value here is that reduces your percentages to hit and defense. Like when you do your assault checks and defense checks, they will be reduced by the amount of pain you're suffering. Stun is similar to pain. The penalties are the same in the same, by saying that, is that it is in values of 5, 10, 15%, but stun is only different because it recovers every round. Every turn of combat that goes by, you recover 1 stun point. So what you have here is you have the 2 stun boxes, like true pain, true damage, and then pain penalties. You would have stun points of damage and stun penalties. So they're going to be the same type of value, and your character suffers equally from both, but true damage stays until you're healed. Stun recovers over time. The blood loss is a value that happens during combat. If for some reason you take some type of damage that causes you to lose blood, like getting stabbed in the neck, stabbed in the stomach, certain complications from someone acing an attack, you will have a certain die roll that you lose so many life force worth of blood. Now, blood loss counts directly against your life force, but it does not cause any pain. So you will lose life over it. Your strength will be reduced by it, but you won't suffer any pain for it. So your stats are actually going to stay the same if you suffer blood loss. The total penalties here are just basically the sum of all the previous penalties. So in the middle of battle, if you were wanting to keep track of 10% pain penalties, 15% stun penalties, and you wanted to jot down the total, that's where it'll be. The next category is ability scores. The ability scores are, if you're familiar with role-playing games or role-playing games, whether they be on computer or tabletop, you'll kind of know what these scores mean. I can give you a quick rundown that the way they're a little different in Paridine is not going to be night and day with other games. They're gonna be very similar to what you're used to. Like your dexterity is your hand-eye coordination. Basically, the higher the dexterity you have, the better you are at wielding weapons, swinging swords, and picking locks, and doing things with your hands. Agility is a score of how agile you are, how if you could do somersaults, if you could do backflips, if you could move around really nimbly on your feet. That that value represents your agility. Your vitality is how physically resilient you are to poisons, taking stun damage, um, overall your physical endurance to withstand pain on your body. And it's not pain in the sense that it'll reduce your pain penalties, but if you was to drink a potion and you weren't sure what it was, instead of rolling the percentage that would coincide with your dodge or parry, you would roll a grit check if you had to resist that potion, and that percentage is based off your vitality. Intelligence is how smart you are, how book smart you are, how well learned you are. It will help for mages and casters that use spells. Uh, the intelligence will determine your conjure, and as you see here on your assault checks and your defense checks, you will notice that each one of these percentages, whether you're trying to attack someone with assault checks or defend from oncoming attacks using your defense checks, each one of these values is tied directly to the number that's in your ability score. So if you have a 32% vitality, you're going to have a 32% to fortify and a 32% grit. So, and that's a very low value, by the way. I just threw that out there, but just so you know that these boxes here coincide directly with these. Your wisdom, it's used for resolve, which is your mental defense. It basically represents how wise your character is, not necessarily book smart, but in other words, like street smart, or how aware you are. This value is good for your mental resilience in case someone was casting spells on you or things like that. Your resolve would come into play there. Your personality is how likable you are as a person. In most cases, when I've played Paridine and tested it out, there's like most RPGs has a dump stat. A lot of people tend to dump their lowest score into here. If you wanted to lie or charm animals, or if you were trying to be a bard, that would be a bad stat to dump. That also coincides with how well you can perform actions, like perform a dance or a song, if you were a bard to cast the spell or whatever it is you were trying to do. And as I was saying, as these assault checks go down the list here, you notice that in order to swing a sword using your melee attack, it's based directly off the percentage that's in your dexterity. And also to parry an attack. To parry an attack would be to use your melee weapon and to deflect an oncoming attack. Your agility represent how well you aim and how well you can dodge from an attack. To let you know the difference between parry and dodge, in Paridine, you could only parry certain attacks. There would be attacks that you could, in theory, block with your sword, like other engaged monsters with hand-to-hand weapons or something of that effect. You're not if you spring a big boulder trap, parrying that's not going to work. When Indiana Jones was running from that huge boulder, I doubt he could have turned around and whacked it away with a sword. So you keep these two values for different reasons, for different types of attacks that come against your character. And fortify is a skill or an assault check that is used by like monks, and that's to harness their chi energy if they wanted to throw a fireball or fortify their chi armor or anything to that effect, where they have to dig down into their energy of their body, which is in Paridine where the chi comes from. Their attacks would be driven from their fortify ability. For conjure, it's for mages. Basically, it's for anyone casting a spell, using a wand, using an orb, reading from a magical book, and casting a spell from a book or scroll. The conjure ability will represent that value. Focus is it's tied to your wisdom. It's used by a couple classes. It's used by clerics will use it to focus their prayers if they're trying to cast a prayer, or some miracles may require it, but usually those are automatic. Focus is used to conjure those abilities. And perform, as I said earlier, minstrels, bards, performers will use that percentage. So the stat breakdown is to basically give you an idea of the strength and weaknesses to a lot of class professions. Some of these percentages will be high, some will be low. Does not mean that a knight couldn't one day cast a spell from a book. He would just have to use his conjure percentage rather than his melee to swing a sword. Over here on the defense checks, you have parry, dodge, grit, resolve, and grapple. Now, the only thing out of all of these, you could play the Sesame Street game, and one of these things is not like the other, and that one is going to be grapple, and I'll tell you why. Grapple is a tricky mechanic that we had to work with for a while. We might change that, but when you get actually on the ground and you're we assume someone's grabbing you or trying to detain you or tackle you, it's more than just an opposed strength check. For a while we had it like, my strength and your strength, but it was more than that. There is we wanted to add another layer of complexity to grapple, so it wasn't just a sheer like arm wrestling contest when you're tackling someone. We added a modifier here, and it counts like a skill. This plus value means that grapple will work very similarly to these skills down here, and we'll get to that later. But before I get ahead of myself, I think the parry dodge has been explained. Grit check I kind of touched on with potions is that you roll this if you have to defend from a siren, a loud sound that might hurt your ears, a poisonous gas that you're inhaling, things like that. And a resolve is a defense from spells. At the top of the page up here, as you see these in the corner, the experience bank is where you jot down your experience that you're collecting from battle to battle. This called shots box is just a place, if you choose to use it, a place for you to mark down the percentages of how hard it would be for you to call a shot to a small target or a large target, because called shots in the game of Paridine actually are very lethal, because you can bypass armor. If I was to call like a shot to stab you in the eyeball, you would not take any defensive bonuses from your helmet or anything that you might be wearing on your head, because people's eyes are normally uncovered. So you can keep those there, so it's a quick place. You don't have to do the math every time. You can put down what your percentages are to call shots. Penalties to foes are percentages that you knock down from the enemy. As you go up in certain titles, your skill in combat will be greater. And when your skill in combat is greater, you impose a penalty to your foe in some cases. Just by them fighting you, it's harder for them to defend against you as it would another person. And by that, the game itself has two different roles in a combat. There's the offensive attack roll, which is where the attacker rolls under the percentage of their assault check. The defender must roll under the percentage of their defense check in order to defend against the attacker. These penalties to the foe signifies the percentage deduction they have to take from their skill to defend against you. So that's very valuable. That'll help turn the tide of the battle, because these are very powerful penalties that you're imposing. A lot of these here are going to say mod. Down here there is a thing with skills that you're going to see on grapple, and it has right here under grapple, it'll say vitality mod. Now, the vitality ability score and all your percentages are going to be a number between 30 and 85. When you roll your character's stats and you apply the bonuses you get from their profession and the bonuses they get from their race, they will come up with a number between 30 and 85. Those are your percentages to succeed in doing whatever it is they are trying to do under that category. Well, when it's mentioned that it's a vitality mod, it's not a vitality score. The mod number just means that if your vitality is a 54, the mod is the first digit of the number, so it'll be a 5. As you see down here, it states the first digit is the ability mod. So a grapple of a vitality mod, and that's a 54, would be a +5. It's a simple number that's taken from the beginning part of the number of your percentage. It's used as bonuses to your skills right here below on the right. We will get to that in a second. I'm just going to skim over the weapons now because I explained basically the meat of what makes your character who they are and how good they perform their actions. The weapons will have a place for you to write down the type of weapon it is. The class is the overall damage or the overall value of the weapon. If you had a class 3 sword, it's basically a sword that'll do 3 points of damage plus whatever you roll for your strength. So weapons can range anywhere from 1 to a 6, give or take 1 or 2 depending on if it has any special properties. But the class represents the base value of the damage of the weapon. The ratio modifier is extra damage the weapon will do if it's Dwarven or Elven. There's 2 ratio modifiers in Paridine, and that's Dwarven and Elven. Elven will add +1 damage to any weapon it's on, and +2 if it's a Dwarven weapon. So if you have a class 3 sword and it's a Dwarven sword, it's going to be a class 5. It'll look like a class 3 sword, like any other class 3 sword, but it's crafted much better. It's crafted by the dwarves using dwarven steel, or however you want to imagine it. The dwarven make and craftsmanship of it improves the quality of it to some degree by the racial attributes. Magic is a value between 1 and 8 that'll also be added to your weapon if you get any magic points added to your weapon. There may be some times where you find a weapon with magic in it, or if you just find if you go to the town and buy a weapon with magic in it. That's a value that's put into the weapon that is a magic value. So if you had a +3 sword from its class and 3 magic, it would be a +6 sword of damage. It would do its damage of +6 with your strength roll. So, if your strength is a 5 and you rolled a d6 and you rolled a 5 +6 on your sword, you're doing 11 points of damage on that particular swing. The magic value is very important because some creatures can only be hit by magic. If you're attacking a ghost and you hit the ghost with your sword, you're going to ignore the racial and class of your weapon because your steel and the iron of your sword means nothing to the ghost. The magical essence of the sword is what actually tears into the ethereal realm and does damage to the ghost's essence. And the last part of the bonus of the weapons is quality. Quality is a value between 1 and 4 that you can have on a weapon. It means the weapon was made exceptionally well by some of the best craftsmanship in the land, by whoever the best blacksmith is. If it's a 4, it means it's some of the best quality you could find. If it's a 1, it's just slightly better than a normal type weapon. To let you know, the magic and quality in a weapon costs a lot of money, so if you find them randomly, they're worth a lot, because they do change the tide of the battle, hitting as hard as you do with these types of weapons. The speed, like I said earlier, is basically a die that you roll that represents what turn in combat you go. The higher the number, the faster you go, and you go first in combat, the higher your number. So some weapons that are slow roll on a d4. Some fast weapons go on a d12. And you roll with the rest of your party and your fellow players, and you go in turn from highest to lowest. Aggravated damage. Here, AGG is aggravated damage. It basically is extra damage that your weapon will do against flesh. Flesh is because it's so soft and pliable. Some weapons tear through flesh better than they tear through armor. As an example, a samurai sword or a katana. They don't necessarily do a lot of brute force damage, but they will get bonuses to their damage if they actually come in contact with your flesh. So, as a katana may only be a class 2 sword, it will have a +2 aggravated damage The katana itself doesn't actually do a lot of damage against armor. It'll only do +2 plus your strength. But if for some reason I was able to cut through your armor with it and actually come in contact with your flesh, I will get an additional 2 points of damage to that attack, and it will wound you greater than it would have normally with your armor reduction. Sizes. In Paridine, we have 2 sizes of items that you can carry. Most items that you can carry, whether they be in your backpack or lamps, lanterns, scrolls, books, staves, wands, orbs, swords, shields, they're either going to be small or large. You can only carry 5 large objects on your character. So you're going to want to keep track of what items you have that are small, like daggers, or large, like great swords. And that's what that box is. The weapon type. This is going to signify the type of weapon damage your weapon does. There is blunt, there is slashing, and there is piercing. These are important to the types of damage against certain armor that will be done. If I do blunt damage, there's complication rules in the book that go over what blunt damage is, what complications come with blunt damage, and the same goes for slashing and piercing. It's important because, for instance, blunt damage does not get reduced by pliable armor. You'll have different types of armor. There'll be pliable and rigid armor. Chainmail would be pliable. Plate mail would be rigid. So if you're wearing a full set of chainmail and I actually come in contact with you with a mace, guess what? Your chainmail's not going to help you because it's pliable and the mace does crushing damage. So your bones aren't going to be any less broken because of a meshy shirt that you're wearing made of steel. It will actually crush in your lungs or wherever I hit you with it. Slashing is affected by all armor. That's a standard attack. All armor will reduce slashing evenly. Piercing has a less chance to do killing blows, but there's more blood loss with piercing. And also with piercing, you will reduce armor value in half. So if someone has a total of a -9 armor on their chest from all the layers of armor they have, it's only -4 to you. And yes, I rounded it down. As everything is in Paridine, it is rounded down, not up. So if they have 8 armor, it's -4. If they have 9 armor, it's still -4. Those are the damage types. As you can see up here, it explains a little bit what they mean. Penalties. These are penalties to your foe from using the weapon. In some cases, if the weapon was a bow, your foe will take a -10 penalty from dodging the attack. You'll put that penalty there. Because it's harder to dodge an arrow than it would be to dodge a sword, because arrows are much faster and it's hard to see them. The range of the weapon could be no range at all, which just means it'll hit adjacent to you 1 square. It could have a +1 range, which means you can hit 2 squares away. Or you can have a line of sight range like a bow, and anything you can kind of see, you can shoot within the dungeon. And then the overall damage here is all of these values calculated into a rounded damage number. Class, race, magic, quality, added together to form your overall damage. As we have over here, the class powers. Magic points, faith points, spirit points, bank chi. You could ignore this box entirely unless you are a wizard, or a cleric, or a shaman, or a monk. The wizard will write down any magic points that he has here. It's kind of like his mana. He uses those to cast spells. Faith points is a value that represents a cleric's faith in his deity, and as he casts prayers, he will deplenish his faith, and his faith will go down. He gets that back by tithing, by the way, by spending money, basically. Spirit points are shaman's spirit pool, and they have to sacrifice the dead to gain more spirit points. Bank chi is basically the monk's chi system. You could read that in the monk's profession area in the character player tome. there is a information about the monk there on how he manages chi energy. Now with ammunition here, it's pretty explanatory about the ammo. Is just bolts and arrows that you would use for crossbows and bows. And maybe if anything else arises that we construct that would use ammo. But right now it's for bows and crossbows. You can put down what type of bolt or arrow it is. Each quiver comes with 20. Again, you have racial, magic, and quality that increases the damage, the aggravated damage, the size, checkbox L for large, because a quiver of arrows takes up a large character slot, and the overall damage of the arrows. The proficiencies box is just a place for you to jot down what you're proficient in. Depending on your class and your profession and race, you will have proficiencies for medium and heavy armor, the ability to use shields, melee weapons such as blades, axes, blunts, and spears, bows, crossbows, and throwing, and exotic weapons. If you do not contain a proficiency in a weapon, you could still use it, but you will take a 50% penalty to use it. And by 50% is if you wanted to use your melee to swing an axe that you are not proficient with, you have a 50% of your melee percentage. What that means is if your melee is 75%, you will have a 37% to hit with an axe. You will miss a lot in battle, but it's not impossible. So that's what proficiencies are for. Armor, similar to the same stat system as weapons, instead of a positive value, they will represent a negative value. Chainmail, leather, plate armor, all has a negative value for its class. For instance, leather will have a -2 value to its class. That means it reduces 2 points of damage to anything that comes in contact with your leather. And same thing goes for chainmail, that has a -4 value, and plate armor has a -6 value. Racials will add more negative. Elven will give you -1, Dwarven will give you an extra -2. Magic will give you up to -8 points. Quality will give you up to -4 more points. There is N, F, and R stands for natural, flexible, and rigid. Natural armor is anything made from leather or wood or something natural. That's very important because some elemental attacks or magic attacks may not be able to penetrate natural armor. The flexible is a type of armor that will not help you against blunt items. And rigid armor will only, that armor will protect you from anything that you get attacked by. So a sword or a mace will get reduced just as equally with rigid armor. Then you could put the overall value of your armor into the armor end box here with the total reduction that it gives you after you add your class, race, magic, and quality. Down here there's a shields box. This is if your character is carrying any shields. You can write down what their shield class, race, magic, and quality is. They get a parry bonus with their shields, depending on if you have the endowment that gives you that ability. All shields are usually large unless you're wearing a buckler. And you could put here if it's a natural shield. That's just to determine if it's a wooden shield or a steel shield. The block value from 2 to 5 is basically your success roll on a shield by rolling a d6. You'll roll a d6, and if it's a block value of a 2, that means you're probably wearing a buckler. And that means you have to roll a 2 or a 1 on a d6 to block any attack. If you're equipped with a tower shield, it'll be probably a 5, in which case you only have 1 in 6 chance of not using your shield because it covers your whole body. Shields are very important in the game. They will save your life. Down here, if you're a spellcaster like a wizard, you will eventually be carrying around wands, orbs, and staves. You will put the type of wand, orb, and staff here, some info about it, the range of it. Orbs and wands are small, staves are large, how many charges they have. You'll see the boxes here separated into a couple columns in the charges. The first 2 boxes are separated by themselves because orbs only have 2 charges. If you have a wand, you'll have 4 charges. If you have a staff, you'll have 8 charges. Charges are basically how many times you can successfully use that item in battle before it's depleted. Those charges do return at the end of every battle. So when the battle's over, you loot for treasure and you get experience, your charges come back. And this is the type of damage that your weapons will do, your orbs, wands, and staffs. This over here is your languages. Your languages are what your character can understand and speak in the game of Paridine. You start with a few, maybe one or two, depending on your race and your profession. And certain languages actually require you to have a certain intelligence percentage for you to even obtain them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't get them in other ways. You can drink potions that might give you a language, or a magical spell might give you a language. In this case, if you're trying to buy these languages with experience and learn them, you have to be smart enough to do it. So not everyone can learn all languages. If we scroll up here, we kind of worked around the standard skill box. These skills right here are things your character can do mostly out of combat, and they give a little flavor to your character's abilities and give them some roleplay elements that you might use during a gaming session. For appraising objects, rolling athletics checks against falling down, charming someone to make them stop attacking you or get a discount in a shop, to lie to someone with your deceive skill, to intimidate someone to knock down their percentages from you using like a fear chart. We have a chart for fear penalties. You'll have up to 4 or 5 possible lores that you can have depending on your class. The lores is your character knowledge of certain items, history, people in the game. It's basically to allow your player to know some metagaming knowledge about what you're going against if you can make a lore check. There's mechanical, which is your ability to disarm traps or to pick locks. You have perception, which is a very important skill. Whenever you are wandering through a dungeon, you might roll that you lost your money, you might lose arrows, something to that effect, and you have to roll your perception skill to see it or you lose it. If your perception's not high enough, you're going to be naked by the time the adventure is done. The repair metal and leather is usually reserved to dwarves, but as you adventure through Paridine, your gear will take damage and will eventually break. Nothing in Paridine lasts forever. If you have repair, you could extend the life of the items that you carry, saves you money in the end, so those are good to have. Search skill, whenever you kill a monster, you get experience, it's time to loot for treasure. The higher your search skill, the more likely you're going to beat your fellow players to the roll on finding that one random treasure that's on a monster. Treasure is the main goal of the game, and getting experience. Make sure your search is high. Sleight of hand is for those rogues or thieves out there, for backstabbing, for stealing items. Sometimes that comes into play with sleight of hand. All these are actually described in the book in great detail. There's stealth. It's your ability to avoid being seen, to get the jump on an enemy during initiative rolls. And then there's survival, which is your ability to survive out in the wild. Some random event rolls will require you to roll that, or you might take hunger damage, or you could hunt for food with that roll. These abilities, these skills are actually based on the ability mod of their bound attribute here. And that bound attribute, for instance, appraise is your intelligence, deceive is your personality, your perception is your wisdom. You basically come up here to the ability score, grab the first digit of your percentage, pop it down in this column here, and then add any modifiers that you get from your profession or your race, total them up here, and that is your bonus to your skill roll when it's time to do that. The explanation on how to do skill rolls is in the player tome, and you can find more information there. This down here in the lower left-hand corner is where you will track all your coins and gems. When you're playing Paridine, you will find quite a few items and treasures, and a lot of those come in the form of coins and gems, and those are raw monetary value that as a cleric you can tithe, or when you get back to shop you can upgrade a lot of your stuff. This is where you'll write down the values of whatever you find. Mithril, as you notice, the ratio here is the gold ratio to the actual item ratio. So mithril is 1 to 5. For every 1 mithril is worth 5 gold. Everything in the shop is valued in gold. So when you get back to town, you will have to go through your gems and coins, and you will have to convert them all into a massive gold value before you could actually purchase anything. Everyone in the game starts with a backpack and 2 bags. They carry a certain number of small and large items per bag, so you'll want those checked. So on the second page, you could see what you put in your backpack, what you put in your bags, and you could check them off if they're large or small, because they only carry a certain type of item. As you are a monk, shaman, bard, cleric, wizard, you'll get a certain number of attacks that are your special abilities, and you will want to write those down as you obtain them throughout the game in this section. Fireballs, lightning spells, inflict prayers, charm songs, chi energy balls, summoning spirits as a shaman. Those abilities all have names. The resource cost in the cost field will tell you what the resource cost is for the powers, the class powers I was talking about earlier, the damage they may do, the range, and the difficulty. If you take any penalties to actually performing these, the difficulty will be here, and that will be a percentage that is reduced from your assault checks here. So if you have a difficulty of a -20 to cast a certain spell, then your conjure will take a -20, and it's harder to perform in battle. Down here in the endowments box, this is basically all of the endowments so far we have in the game. As you purchase them, you check them off, and you can write down in other parts of your character sheet all the abilities and all the bonuses they give you. But it's basically a quick checklist to keep track of everything your character has obtained with experience throughout the game. The special abilities and traits is things you can write down that aren't necessarily written in the endowments. If you drink a potion that allows you to see in the dark, you'll want to put that here. Anything that you have no other place to put it that would be considered a special ability or a trait that your character has, that's where it'll go. Any special information on your character, maybe you have a bounty out for your head, you killed the king's daughter, and the king, knights are looking for you. You might have killed a couple greater demons in your time, and they have a pact to have revenge on you or whatnot. All that information will go in here. Maybe some roleplay elements can go in there as well. And last but not least, you have some pouches down here that every character is considered to have 10 food, 10 water, and if you're a shaman, you will start collecting elements as you get them for certain abilities. The 10 food and 10 water is what you're considered to be carrying around at all times as your provisions to survive as you're on adventures and you're traveling. During the random movement rolls during the game, there will be times when you have to eat and drink. You check these off as you do that. If you run out and you have to roll those, eat or drink, and you don't have any food or water, you will take damage and your stats will go down unless someone can share their resources with you and give you some water or food. Overall, that was just the rundown of the character sheet. I'm going to do some more tutorial videos here soon, but I'm going to go ahead and upload this. And if you have any questions, you can go to our forums, or you could email me any other questions that you might have. Thank you for tuning in.